The framed photographs that line the dusty shelf above the old fireplace no longer feel like records of a real life, but more like artifacts from a forgotten story that never truly belonged to me. There are countless frozen moments from nearly 2 decades of shared time, all smiling faces and carefully staged memories that now feel staged in a way I never recognized before. In one, a younger version of myself stands beside a woman named Elira, her dark hair swept into a loose updo, sunlight catching the edge of her veil as wind lifts the fabric of her dress like a sail about to carry her somewhere far from me. In another, we are standing on a rocky overlook during a long-ago anniversary trip, arms around each other, pretending the cold didn't bother us while we admired a view that felt endless. In the most recent photo, taken at a company gala less than a year ago, her smile is still there, but hollow, stretched thin across her face as though it belonged to someone else entirely. I sit alone in a worn chair, holding a drink I forgot to finish, staring at these images and trying to pinpoint the exact moment when the woman I married became a stranger living inside the same house. I tell myself we were happy not long ago, but doubt creeps in, whispering that maybe I was the only one who believed that. There was a time when silence never felt heavy, when Elira and I could spend entire evenings talking about trivial things and somehow make them feel meaningful. We used to laugh about future trips we couldn't afford, sketching imaginary routes across maps spread over the kitchen table, dreaming of distant places as if dreaming alone could make them real. Sunday mornings were once sacred, slow and warm. The world held at bay while we stayed under the covers longer than necessary, delaying reality just a little while more. Now, words between us are practical and clipped, reduced to reminders about payments, grocery lists, and whose turn it is to pick something up on the way home. The warmth that once lived in our bedroom has faded into something cold and hollow, even when she lies beside me. I notice the way she recoils when I reach for her, the way her phone is always turned face down, how it never leaves her side, even when she steps into the bathroom. The sound of it lighting up at strange hours feels louder than it should, like a secret tapping against the walls. I hear a shift in her voice when she speaks about work, a brightness that feels forced, as if rehearsed, and the name of her new supervisor, Kellen Rowe, slips into conversation just often enough to raise questions she never answers. After exhausting shifts repairing machinery at the distribution center, my body aches too much to entertain suspicion, yet my mind refuses to rest. One evening, grease still clinging to my hands, I ask if she'll be late again, trying to keep my voice steady. She barely looks up from her screen when she responds, mentioning deadlines and last-minute reports, words that feel too polished, too automatic. I notice her hair has changed, styled in ways she never bothered with before, and her perfume seems stronger, applied long before she leaves for the day. She starts mentioning outings with colleagues, though the people she refers to are always faceless, reduced to vague groups and generic titles. When she returns late one night, makeup still fresh, she heads straight for the shower without explanation. The unease settles deep in my chest, a constant weight I can't shake. Each small detail piles on the next until it feels impossible to ignore, like a structure built from tiny, fragile lies that somehow manage to hold their shape. The moment that truly unsettles me arrives on a quiet morning as we move through the kitchen in our familiar choreography, she blending fruit for a drink while I wait for coffee to finish brewing. She casually mentions plans for the next day, dropping the information between comments about bills and the weather, her tone light but rehearsed. She says she'll be out for several hours, maybe visiting stores near the highway, her eyes darting away when I ask for specifics. Something in her voice feels off, too carefully constructed, like a line delivered from memory rather than truth. When I reply that I don't need anything, she glances back at me, and for a fleeting second I catch a look of doubt, perhaps even guilt, before it disappears behind a practiced smile. The rest of the day drags on, every minute stretching as anticipation and dread tangle together. I try to distract myself, but my thoughts circle back to her words, replaying them until they sound hollow. When she finally comes downstairs the next afternoon, dressed in clothes that feel more suited for an evening out than casual errands. My chest tightens. She looks radiant in a way she hasn't for me in months, her confidence undeniable, and when she asks how she looks, I struggle to respond honestly. She kisses my cheek, leaving behind a trail of her most expensive fragrance, and drives away after checking her reflection one last time. Alone in the house, I wander upstairs, compelled by a feeling I can't name. In the bathroom, I notice a familiar absence among the folded clothes, a particular set of garments she hasn't worn for me in a long time. The realization stings, but I try to rationalize it away until I find a receipt later that night showing a single purchase made during the hours she claimed to be shopping. The timeline doesn't make sense, and neither do the miles on her car. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. I begin to keep quiet records, noting the times she leaves and returns, the stories she tells, the contradictions that pile up. Each inconsistency feels small on its own, but together they form a pattern I can no longer deny. When she mentions visiting places that I later learn are closed, the unease grows into certainty. A friend casually mentions seeing her car parked somewhere unfamiliar, and my heart races as I try to maintain a facade of indifference. That night when she sleeps, I search her belongings and find a card with a name and title that confirms my worst fears. I replace it carefully, my hands trembling, then sit alone in the dark, absorbing the reality that my marriage has become something I no longer recognize. The days that follow feel unreal, like I'm moving through a version of my life that doesn't belong to me anymore. I gather information quietly, piecing together details from social media and professional profiles, learning more about the man who has inserted himself into our story. The more I uncover, the clearer everything becomes, each discovery tightening the knot in my stomach. I plan in silence, weighing my options, knowing that whatever I choose will alter the course of my life. When she announces yet another outing, I nod as if nothing is wrong, though my resolve hardens with every passing hour. The morning she leaves again. I feel the weight of my wedding ring more than ever before, a symbol that now feels heavier than the commitment it once represented. I tell myself that by the end of the day, everything will change, one way or another. I prepare quietly, making sure I have what I need, rehearsing the possibilities in my mind. As she walks out the door, affectionate in a way that feels forced, I watch her go, knowing that the truth is no longer something I can avoid. From a hidden vantage point, I wait, heart pounding, scanning every movement. When her car finally appears, followed by another I recognize from photos, the last pieces fall into place. The scene that unfolds confirms everything I feared, and though the sight breaks something inside me, it also brings a strange clarity. The questions that haunted me dissolve, replaced by a cold understanding of what has been happening all along. I record what I see, not out of vengeance but out of necessity, knowing that truth demands evidence. Every second feels like an eternity, yet I remain still, capturing proof of the life she chose over the one we built. The world seems to narrow to that single moment, the reality undeniable and irreversible. When I finally reveal myself, the shock on their faces mirrors the collapse of everything I once believed. I speak calmly, though my heart races, and I make a choice that feels both terrifying and inevitable. I walk away not as a man seeking revenge, but as someone who refuses to live in a lie any longer. Back in the silence of my own space, I realize that while my marriage has ended, something else has begun. The truth, painful as it is, has set me on a path toward a life built on honesty rather than illusion. I am no longer waiting for explanations that will never come. I am ready to move forward, whatever that may mean. I do not return home immediately after leaving that parking lot because the idea of stepping back into those rooms, surrounded by carefully curated memories that no longer mean what I thought they did, makes my chest tighten until it feels hard to breathe. Instead, I drive aimlessly through unfamiliar neighborhoods until the city blurs into a smear of streetlights and shadows, eventually pulling into the quiet office of an old friend named Corwin Hale, who has spent years building a small legal practice after grinding his way through night classes and endless internships. He studies the recording on my phone without flinching, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp, already analyzing implications, consequences, and leverage. When it ends, he exhales slowly and explains that while the law may not require a spouse to prove wrongdoing to dissolve a marriage, evidence like this changes negotiations dramatically, especially when finances and shared property are involved. His words feel distant, yet grounding, like stepping onto solid ground after drifting in deep water for too long. By the time I leave, documents in hand, I understand that my future will be shaped not by anger, but by the clarity I have finally allowed myself to accept. That night, instead of collapsing into grief, I move with a strange sense of purpose, stopping at a store to buy storage devices and sitting in a quiet cafe where the internet connection is strong enough to upload everything safely. I create new digital spaces where the truth cannot be erased, where the evidence exists beyond the reach of denial or manipulation. I edit carefully, removing anything that could be considered explicit, yet leaving enough context to make the betrayal unmistakable. Then, one by one, I send the file to family members, close friends, colleagues, and community groups, labeling it with names, locations, and a time that leaves no room for misinterpretation. Each message feels like releasing a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward faster than I expect, carrying consequences neither of them prepared for. When I finally return to the house, I change the locks with hands that no longer shake, each click of metal sealing a chapter that has already ended. My phone vibrates relentlessly as notifications pour in, voices reacting with shock, disbelief, and sympathy. Calls go unanswered, messages stack on top of one another, and I sit alone at the kitchen table with paperwork laid out in neat rows, feeling neither triumph nor regret, only a quiet certainty that there is no turning back now. The door rattles with desperate knocks later that evening, and through the wood I hear Elira's voice cracking, shifting from anger to pleading to hollow threats, all of which dissolve into meaningless noise against the truth I already know. Over the following days, the world reacts in ways I never anticipated. Whispers turn into open conversations, and the story becomes something larger than the three of us. The man who once walked through our home as a confident executive now faces scrutiny from his own colleagues and family, while Elira struggles under the weight of a reputation she can no longer control. I watch from a distance as the consequences unfold, not out of spite, but because this is what happens when secrecy collapses under the weight of its own lies. There is no satisfaction in their downfall, only a sobering recognition that actions always find their way back to those who choose them. Months pass in a haze of paperwork, adjustments, and quiet evenings spent rediscovering who I am outside of the life I once shared. The house feels different without her presence, not emptier but lighter, as though it has finally exhaled after holding its breath for years. I repaint walls, rearrange furniture, and replace the bed that once felt like a symbol of everything I lost. Friends stop by, offering support, and slowly the silence becomes something I welcome rather than fear. I learn that healing is not a sudden realization, but a gradual return to myself. There are moments when memories surface unexpectedly, bringing with them a dull ache, but they no longer define me. I begin taking on more responsibility at work, finding satisfaction in routines that are honest and predictable. Systems make sense to me now, whether mechanical or emotional, because they reveal their flaws when something is wrong. There is comfort in that transparency, a reminder that truth, no matter how painful, is always simpler than deceit. Occasionally, news reaches me about the lives they are now forced to navigate, but it no longer stirs anything deep inside. Their story is no longer mine, and I refuse to carry it with me. Instead, I focus on building something new piece by piece, whether it is restoring an old car in the garage or learning to trust again in small, careful steps. There is a quiet pride in creating something real, something that does not rely on illusion to exist. I begin seeing someone new, not as a replacement, but as a reminder that connection can still grow from honesty. We move slowly, sharing stories without pretense. And when she asks about my past, I tell her the truth without bitterness. The version of love I seek now is grounded in openness, not fantasy, and for the first time in a long while that feels enough. One evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, I sit outside listening to the distant sounds of the neighborhood settling into night. The air feels lighter, and so do I. The life I once believed was permanent has transformed into a lesson rather than a wound, a reminder that endings are not failures, but invitations to begin again. I no longer measure my worth by what was taken from me, but by what I have chosen to build in its place. I delete the final copy of the recording from my phone, not because I have forgiven, but because I no longer need proof of something that has already shaped my path. The truth has done its work, and I am free to move forward without carrying the weight of what once was. There is dignity in choosing honesty, even when it costs everything, and strength in knowing that my life, however different it may look now, is finally my own. As another day begins, I welcome the simplicity of small moments, morning light through the windows, the hum of ordinary life continuing around me. The future is no longer a place I fear, but a horizon I am ready to approach with clarity and resolve. Whatever comes next, I will face it with open eyes, grounded in the knowledge that truth, once embraced, has the power to set us free.